So I haven't talked about a movie over here in a while. I used to do that a lot more, but games have been keeping me busy. Still, there was a movie that got my butt out of bed, and I want to talk about it a lot. It's John Wick 4. I'm a little late to the party, but I absolutely love this movie. So I want to talk about it. I'm not going to go into spoilers until a little further in. This part's spoiler-free. I'll let you know when I talk spoilers. Not like it's like a big movie to be spoiled. It's not like Darth Maul shows up at the end or anything like that. But still, for me, and I've talked to some people already that kind of share the same opinion. It's probably not like a hot take. This is my favorite one since the first one. My hot take, though, is that I kind of only like the first one. So that's my context here. John Wick, the original movie, is a movie I should have made a video on this channel. Like, it's one I would have loved to have talked about in depth or something like how I did with Batman Begins. Like, it's one of those great ones for me. It came out of nowhere. It has a lot of things I love. It has Keanu Reeves. It has New York. It has crazy action. It has gun kata, if you want to call it that. It has all of Keanu's awesome moves. It's got Willem Dafoe. It's got cool car chases, a dog, a man out for revenge. It's got Russian mobsters. Like, it's got all the stuff I really like, especially in video games. And the movie was incredible. It's incredible because it had like awesome, mind-blowing, well-choreographed action and really thought out and memorable sequences with really good visual style, but also it told a very simple but good, effective story that had little snippets of lore and like world building in it that, you know, intrigued you, but it was just enough. 2 and 3 for me kind of like lost the plot a little bit. I loved how they ramped up the action. It got more and more incredible. I didn't necessarily like how they built out a lot of the lore as much as it seemed cool and mysterious. Once they started to grow it out, I feel like some of their ideas were kind of drying up with it, but 4 kind of brought that back around a little bit. It still spends time on the Continental and like the table lore, but it doesn't go overboard on it, and it kind of just sets some rules within the world, and then you go from there. And that's what I really liked about it. Ultimately, I found this to be kind of like a celebration of what they have done with these movies thus far, and it's felt to me like everybody in this movie was working on hard mode. Keanu Reeves, I thought, since the first, his moves and a lot of his actions, I thought were the best since the first one. Like, he felt the most fresh, the most energetic. Everything from like where it was shot to the way they did the sequences. It was like the writers, the choreographers, the director, the cinematographers. It was like they chose hard mode for everything. There were so many scenes where like that could have been a cool action scene, but then they added something and it's like you look and you're like, how the hell did they do that? That had to have been so hard. And I love stuff like that. I'm not a movie guy. I'm not like your Johns or your Stuckman or anything like that, but I do appreciate and am fascinated by how massive groups of people put together these movies. And I think John Wick 4 is going to be a really good example of just like a well-built, crazy, fun action movie thing. Without spoiling anything, like I think it managed to do justice to characters that have existed in this world. I also think that it did a really good job introducing a new character just for this movie that once again has history with John Wick, but they did a really good job this time actually making you give a damn. Laurence Fishburne is like funnier and sassier in this one. The car chase is out of this world. The villains are pretty dastardly and over the top, but again, it doesn't go like crazy weird into lore or whatever they're trying to build here. It's pretty straightforward, and it's still very much like if you thought the other two were like 2 and 3 were too cartoony and you're like, nah, this is stupid, it's still pretty cartoony. Like Keanu Reeves gets hit by like 17 cars and gets up. Like, if you can get past that stuff, which I'm easy. Like, I am willing to suspend disbelief. If you're into that, like, then hell yeah, this is, it's really good. I totally recommend it if you can't tell. Now, it's hard to keep going without getting into spoilers. So spoiler warning now, if you haven't seen the movie yet, but you want to be surprised or see it for yourself, maybe come back here. But that was your spoiler warning. So let's just dive in. A couple of things I want to talk about, and this actually isn't spoilery because it was in the previous movies. The bulletproof suit stuff is interesting, right? Like, I've seen some people like kind of be turned off how these movies now are. With 4, it's like the playing field is leveled, right? It's almost like the progression of a video game where by the end, everybody is armored or everybody has the same weapons as you. Most of the people John faces off against in this movie also have Kevlar or bulletproof suits, whatever they are. So essentially it makes it almost a little repetitive because it's like a game. It's like a lot of enemies are bullet sponges, and you see John kind of solving the puzzle of each enemy, trying to get a bullet into their vulnerable points. And it seems like that would be a turnoff because everybody's running around kind of just getting shot and nothing happening and trying to cover their face with their suit. I actually like it. It's almost like it's turned into this own like fight language or shootout language here, where it's like, oh, like what if people did have bulletproof suits, but they weren't like the end all be all, and everybody's running around firing a lot of bullets because it's cooler, but they're not necessarily all getting killed in one hit. I don't know. It kind of just made for a different flow, a different formula. So like that's my counterpoint to that whole thing. I get it gets a little like repetitive after a while, but it goes back to what I said at the start of this video, where it was like everybody making this movie was kind of like, how do we make it hard mode? How do we make it harder? How do we make it more complicated? And this was them being like, okay, now everybody has bulletproof suits this time, not just John. And what is that like? And it's insane. It is like a video game. And again, it emphasized using cool knives and swords and stuff like that here and there. The whole Osaka, Japan sequence, I really liked the whole thing they set up with the Continental owner. The fact that Hiroyuki Sanada was in it, the whole thing they set up with him and his daughter, like that little bit of like John Wick spin-off lore building stuff, I was actually really interested in, but it was really, really cool to have Sanada and Donnie Yen face off. That was just perfect. Thank you. The emphasis on the blades was cool too. Like the series has had good sword fights before, but what I really liked here was that there was also emphasis on fun stuff like nunchucks. The nunchuck scene was like long and good. When Keanu or John picked up nunchucks and like for the first second just brutalized a couple of dudes with them, I was like, awesome. And then when he backed up and the camera stayed on him and they let him do his form, it made me so happy just knowing his capabilities. And also it reminds me of multiple points in, I know I'm going to go back to The Matrix Reloaded, a movie I really love, don't judge me, where he would get multiple weapons throughout the movie and they'd always let him showcase his handling of those weapons. You know, when he gets the size and they come to him and he... You know, like it felt like a callback to that, and that made me really happy. Very specific, weird Jake thing. I apologize, but it had all that stuff. It had a really, really good car chase around the Arc de Triomphe. Like I thought that was like a little ridiculous towards the end when there's just like dudes getting hit by cars and stuff. But when John Wick is like drifting around the dudes, hanging out of the car, shooting them, and I'm watching it and I'm like, is that real? Is that him really doing that? Like that, to me, is why I often come to the movies. And it's why a lot of times I bitch and complain about how a lot of things are not just like CGI, but just like overly CGI and like rushed and everything looks fake and you have no sense of anything. I go to be amazed by stuff like this. Yes, it's probably not him really. He's probably rigged up and there's probably like a thing, but the fact that they made it with such care and attention to make me believe is why I love movies. And also it goes back again, hard mode. They could have done a really cool chase scene with John Wick once again, but they decided to also make sure that his windshield was blown out and that he had no car doors. Probably technically much more difficult to film and showcase the driver and the action, but they did it because it was cooler, because it had more Keanu leaning out of his car shooting dudes, and it's really impressive to watch. Two other cool things worth mentioning. I don't have like a ton to say about them, but of course, Mr. Nobody. He was a really good standoff, another like interesting little kind of spin-off expansion type thing. He felt like a bit of an outcast, and he got more and more surprising as it went on with his own cool moves, his own special guns, and his own signature style. I like that. But also, of course, what people have been calling the Hotline Miami scene, of course, or which the creator said is actually based off of the game, the lesser known game, Hong Kong Massacre. Either way, as soon as this scene started, I like shit my pants. I was so happy to see this. It was very satisfying to watch. But of course, just another thing in terms of the filmmaker's creativity. Using regular guns, it would have looked cool, but to have him use incendiary rounds or like whatever they were, explosive shotgun rounds, just really made every scene in every room light up and kind of amped it up. That top-down shots looked so much cooler because the shots were literally explosive. Like they had a big flash and a cool effect like they would firing a gun in a top-down video game. Absolutely genius stuff, if you ask me. And with Keanu, again, specifically, like I feel like in this one too, he did the most grappling. There were some parts where like you could really tell like he leapt up and threw his whole body weight into flinging someone around. and just really impressive on-screen stuff by him. I know, like, kissing like Keanu's ass is like this new thing on the internet. Like, everybody loves him. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. But I've been there since Speed. I love Hardball. Nobody talks about Hardball. You love to see this guy win. And like the scene with the stairs, like the stairs going up to the Sacré-Cœur. I don't know how to, the big church thing in Paris that you got to walk up a million stairs for. That whole scene was really cool for a lot of reasons. It was like a symbolic. It was like a metaphor, I guess. Whatever. I'm not smart. But the fact that Keanu Reeves or whoever fell all the way down those steps was incredible. I guess maybe I watched too much Corridor Crew and VFX artists and stuntmen react, but watching that scene and watching him fall all the way down to the bottom of the stairs and it seemingly feeling somewhat real and believable to the point where like I saw him kind of like push himself a little bit to keep going, to keep the fall going. Like it was just so impressive to see that go down on screen that I clapped and like it was like a dead quiet theater. There wasn't a lot of other people in the theater, but like when he landed on that last step, I was like, that's filmmaking, and no one cared. I just couldn't help myself. I'm not a person who speaks or yells or cheers during movies, but I was like, oh yes, like, it's something else. So it's him. But then also two notable highlights, of course. The Russian or German mobster, who actually was played by Scott Adkins, is really cool. He's had some bits in some action movies here and there. He is like a trained, legit fighter. Incredibly charismatic presence on screen and turned into a really, really great like sub-boss for John Wick. A really satisfying long fight, boss fight style, where he fought him a little bit, kicked his ass, the boss runs away, sends his goons after you, you fight the goons and the boss runs away. Like it was really good because he sold it. I'm pretty sure he was in like a fat suit and makeup and prosthetics and stuff because like he was throwing some real good kicks. And it was good to see. But again, that was just something that came out of nowhere. He did not feel like, as much as he could have been generic, that type of character on paper, like, oh, mobster shows up halfway through, he's greedy and big and strong and he has to fight him. It could have been so generic, but it was like handled with enough care, and the person behind the makeup was so good that it was memorable. It was memorable for me more than some of the like mid enemies in the previous movies. The other thing I need to talk about is Donnie Yen. Donnie Yen as Kane is the most incredible thing I've seen in a movie in a minute. Donnie Yen is absolutely fantastic. I've talked about it. You guys have probably heard me throw some mentions here and there in some videos. I love the Ip Man series. It is one of my favorite things ever. It's why I fell in love with Donnie Yen. He's had some incredible parts in other things, but Ip Man to me is just so fucking cool. And everything about the way he acts, the way he moves, he's like a likable personality. And this movie took advantage of it in really great ways. It didn't squander him. It didn't hide him behind a bunch of cuts. They didn't make him the silent badass. They embraced his charisma. They embraced his raw skill and actually created a character on screen that I have not seen like move and look like that ever. It didn't necessarily, like, yes, it's Donnie Yen doing his Donnie Yen thing, but just the way he was choreographed and the things he did in this movie, I've never seen an action star be like that on screen. Like that type of presence, that type of movement, I couldn't get enough of it. But what is even better is that you actually give a shit. And I could not believe that for the fourth John Wick movie to have as much care and attention as, again, going back to the first one, where it really, really sold his whole thing and his relationship with John. That's what I talked about at the start, where it introduced a character that's like, oh, another character from John's past. And it's like, how did I set that up and make you care within the span of one movie? Granted, it's a long movie, but it worked. And then the fact that they killed John Wick. Let's talk about that. I have grown very tired of like big overdramatic killing off of famous characters. I feel like a lot of them don't quite land. They feel a little over dramatic. Like, I don't know, like a lot of them just don't land with me, and I'm very down to be emotional. I am open to crying during a movie and getting my heartstrings tugged out, but a lot of them just felt a little flat and a little like, oh, we have to do this, and John Wick kind of nailed it. Again, like I wasn't like a crying mess or anything, but like when I thought about it, I was like, that was good. It made sense. They managed to do it where it felt right. The whole point of this movie, the conversations he had with so many characters. I mean, conversations, but like John's not really talking much. It's mostly the other characters talking and then him just going, yeah. So like the conversations, the whole theme was essentially like, how long is this going to keep going? What is this? You don't really have a purpose anymore. Like you are just like a murder man. So for it to ultimately end in death, I thought made sense. And it was great that they talked it up the entire time, if you're paying attention. But also the fact that like the only person that could kill John Wick was like his friend, kinda. Like the bad guy didn't get to kill John Wick. John Wick kind of died on his own terms. He used his death, like he kind of sacrificed himself. It was like an actual choice. Granted, like there's some rules with like the duel thing that like it was like a little like that's it. He was able to get away with that. Like you thought that they would come down much harder on how he did it, but still, I think framing it around a duel was genius, but again, also very difficult. Another thing with the developers doing hard mode. They could have had another kick-ass awesome shootout or a one-on-one brutal fist fight in the rain with the bad guy, but they went for something slow and methodical and thought out with rules and real actual movie making tension with a classic style duel, and it worked. So like John Wick died, yes, but like it didn't mean that the bad guy won. The bad guy still lost, but it wasn't just like, oh, you know, it felt right because of connection with Kane and Kane being able to hopefully save his family and redeem himself. And the last thing I want to point out is that what I liked about that is that it all comes back down to what John Wick started from the very beginning. This is just my take. The work camaraderie. It's all about other people doing a thing every day. It's their job. It's the worst job. You're murdering people. You're desensitized to it. But ever since the first movie, when somebody said, hey, John, you working? That to me managed to feel like the through line with this movie between John and Kane. And for it to kind of go out, or John go out with it still kind of feeling that way, like just a firm handshake and two colleagues, and ultimately doing the right thing because that was your work buddy. Like it's good. I also am biased because I didn't want these movies to go on forever. I was happy if it was just the first one existing and that was it. 2 and 3, again, great action, some cool moments, but like I was like, all right, how long are we? What are we doing here? And with 4, wrapped it up in a way I really liked. That's really it. I could probably talk for much longer, but I gotta go. You guys gotta go. So thank you for coming around, listening to me yap about a Keanu Reeves movie where he fires 40 million bullets to kill bad guys. Like, I can't wait to watch this movie again. I want to know what you guys think. If you have seen it, let me know in the comments. What's your favorite John Wick movie? Do you disagree with my hot, spicy take that I thought only the first one was really the good one, but now at least 4 is also really good? So anyway, I guess my hot take is invalid now. 1 and 4 are the only truly great ones. I still like the first one the most, but yeah, anyway, whatever your ranking is, let's talk. I want to hear from you in the comments. Let me know what you think. Let's talk about John Wick. If you like what I'm doing here, just yapping about stuff I love. First of all, if you can't handle that, don't subscribe. But if you get it, clicking the like button helps me out, man. I'm just hanging out. As always, thanks for watching. I'm Jake Baldino. Subscribe because video games, pizza's on me.